Dr. James Mitchell, now serving as Earth's Director of Xenobiological Integration, activated holographic displays that filled the amphitheater with Earth's 4 billion-year evolutionary saga. Every catastrophe in Earth's history became a catalyst for unprecedented innovation. Asteroid impacts that should have ended life instead triggered the mammalian radiation that produced intelligence. Ice ages that should have caused extinction instead drove tool development and social cooperation. Even our species exists because our ancestors learned not just to survive uncertainty, but to transform it into opportunity. The visual displays showed Earth's magnificent resilience in vivid detail: mass extinctions followed by explosive diversification, climate catastrophes becoming evolutionary accelerators, environmental pressures triggering innovations that strengthened the entire biosphere rather than weakening it. Dr. Piprick, now honored as the Federation's first Director of Adaptive Ecosystems, stepped forward with the confidence that had replaced their former junior researcher uncertainty. Perhaps most significantly, we have discovered that biological diversity functions as a creativity amplifier. Human technological and cultural innovation appears to be directly correlated with their evolutionary experience of biological chaos. Their ability to generate novel solutions to unprecedented problems stems from their biological heritage of constant adaptation. The implications rippled through the assembly like quantum waves. For 10,000 years, galactic civilization had optimized relentlessly for safety, predictability, and risk minimization. They had achieved remarkable stability and technological advancement, but at the cost of creative stagnation. Human integration had demonstrated what they had unknowingly sacrificed in their pursuit of perfect order. The voting process that followed was unlike anything in Federation history. Rather than the careful deliberations that typically characterized galactic decision-making, the response was immediate and overwhelming. World after world declared their enthusiastic support for the Biodiversity Initiative, with Earth designated as the central hub for galactic ecological research and innovation. As the session concluded, Elena found herself surrounded by representatives from hundreds of worlds, all eager to discuss implementation timelines for their specific ecosystems. But her attention was drawn to a priority message that had just arrived from Earth: a discovery report from the Mariana Trench describing a newly identified hydrothermal vent ecosystem containing 23 previously unknown species, including organisms that survived by metabolizing methane in ways that challenged the fundamental laws of biochemistry. Elena smiled as she imagined the galaxy's reaction when they learned about Earth's latest impossible discovery: a single volcanic vent on the ocean floor containing more biological innovation than most star systems achieved in millions of years of evolution. The Galactic Council had once declared Earth's biosphere impossible. They had been absolutely correct. By every rule they understood, it should have been impossible. But humans had never been particularly interested in accepting limitations, and now neither was the rest of the galaxy. The age of controlled chaos had begun, and the universe would never be the same. As Elena departed the assembly, she carried with her the knowledge that Earth had given the galaxy something far more valuable than membership or technology. They had given them permission to dream of possibilities beyond the boundaries of careful, cautious existence. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when impossible became inevitable. The restraints bit deep into Commander Elena Rodriguez's wrists as the Kytherian transport ship's engines hummed beneath her feet. Blood trickled from where the energy shackles had burned through her skin during the struggle, but she kept her expression neutral, even as the towering, crystalline aliens discussed her fate in their chittering language. To them, she was just another human prisoner, another specimen from the primitive species they'd been harvesting from Earth's outer colonies for the past decade. This one shows unusual neural patterns, the lead guard, Zektar, observed through his translator implant, his voice a mechanical approximation of emotion. His faceted eyes, like clusters of black diamonds, gleamed with cold curiosity as he studied the readout from his scanner. Elevated cortical activity, enhanced memory centers. Perhaps the breeding programs will find use for her genetic material. Elena bit back the response that burned in her throat, the tactical assessment that would have told them exactly how she could kill 3 of them before they even reached for their weapons. Let them think she was just Elena Vasquez, agricultural coordinator from the Kepler 442b colony, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let them believe humans were nothing more than useful cattle, breeding stock for their empire's expansion. They had no idea what they'd really captured. The transport bay stretched before them like a metallic cavern, filled with rows of processing pods and scanning equipment that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Everything was sterile, efficient, typical Kytherian design, all function and no form. The air recyclers hummed with alien harmonics that made her teeth ache, and the gravity felt slightly off, calibrated for beings evolved under a different star. But Elena's trained eye caught details the aliens wouldn't expect a primitive to notice. The subtle variations in hull plating that indicated this was a military vessel disguised as a transport. The weapons ports cleverly disguised as sensor arrays. The emergency blast door configurations that spoke of a ship designed for combat rather than cargo. Most importantly, she noticed the ship's central processing core, visible through a transparent aluminum viewing port. The quantum neural network that controlled every aspect of the vessel's operations, from life support to navigation to weapon systems. The core pulsed with streams of data flowing like liquid light through crystalline pathways. Beautiful in its own alien way, and utterly vulnerable to someone who understood how quantum neural networks operated. "Move, human," Zektar commanded, prodding her forward with his energy staff. The weapon hummed with barely contained power, its tip glowing a threatening orange. Around them, other Kytherian crew members went about their duties with mechanical precision, their carapaces gleaming under the harsh overhead lighting. Elena stumbled slightly, playing up her helplessness while noting the exact power frequency of the staff, something that might be useful later. Where are you taking me?" she asked in broken standard, affecting the accent of an Outer Rim colonist, someone who'd grown up speaking Earth English rather than the polished standard of the inner worlds.
"To processing, of course," Zektar replied, with what might have been amusement, though it was hard to tell with Kytherians. Their emotional expressions were alien, their mechanical translations even more so. "Your species will serve the Empire, one way or another. If you're fortunate, you'll be assigned to labor colonies. If not..." He let the threat hang in the recycled air. As they walked deeper into the ship, Elena committed every detail to memory with the precision of 15 years in Terran naval intelligence. Corridor configurations, junction points, security checkpoint placements, guard rotations, weapon storage lockers, emergency systems. Her enhanced memory, a product of military conditioning that the Kytherians had dismissed as unusual neural patterns, recorded everything with perfect clarity. They passed other prisoners, humans mostly, but she spotted a few Aldorans and even what looked like a Centauri trader. All of them bore the same haunted expression of people who had abandoned hope. Their eyes followed her with a mixture of curiosity and pity, recognizing fresh prey being led to the slaughter. The deeper they went, the more Elena's anticipation grew. She'd spent the last 5 years developing humanity's most classified project, working in secret laboratories hidden in asteroid belts and dead systems. The Kytherians thought they were dealing with a species that had barely reached the stars, a collection of scattered colonies and primitive vessels held together with desperation and duct tape. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. "Tell me, human," Zektar said as they approached a security checkpoint manned by 2 more guards, "what did you do on your little colony, besides grow food like the insects you are?" Elena kept her voice small, frightened. I coordinated crop rotations, managed water distribution systems. Nothing important." "Nothing important," the Kytherian agreed, and Elena could hear the dismissal in his mechanical voice. To him, to all of them, humans were barely sentient. A useful species, certainly. They bred quickly, adapted well to different environments, and possessed just enough intelligence to follow complex orders. But they were no threat to the mighty Kytherian Empire. As they passed through the checkpoint, Elena noted the security protocols, the scanning procedures, the blind spots in the sensor coverage. Every piece of information was another tool in her arsenal, another advantage the aliens were unknowingly giving her. Soon, she thought, soon they would understand that they hadn't captured a simple farmer. They had brought their doom aboard their own ship. The interrogation chamber was a perfect sphere of polished obsidian metal, its surface so smooth it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design was deliberately disorienting. No corners, no fixed reference points, nothing to anchor a prisoner's sense of direction or stability. Elena sat strapped to a chair that seemed to float in the center of the void, surrounded by walls that curved away into infinity. 3 Kytherians circled her like apex predators studying wounded prey. Zektar maintained his position as primary guard, his energy staff crackling with barely contained power. But it was the other 2 that commanded attention, particularly the one bearing the elaborate carapace decorations of a high-ranking officer. His chitinous exoskeleton was adorned with geometric patterns carved deep into the living shell, each mark representing battles won, species conquered, worlds claimed for the Empire. Human designation, Elena Vasquez, Commander Thekmor read from a holographic display that materialized in the air before him, the alien script flowing like liquid mercury. Captured during pacification raid on Kepler 442b colony. Age, 37 standard years. Physical condition, acceptable for breeding programs. Occupation listed as agricultural coordinator. His compound eyes, each facet the size of Elena's thumbnail, fixed on her with predatory interest. Elena kept her breathing steady, focusing on the meditation techniques drilled into her during counter-interrogation training. Her cover identity was solid. Years of careful construction had gone into Elena Vasquez, colonist and farmer. False employment records, manufactured personal relationships, even fabricated childhood memories implanted through careful psychological conditioning. The real Elena Rodriguez, commander of the Terran Navy's Project Lazarus, remained buried beneath layers of deception so deep that even Kytherian mind scanners would find only what she wanted them to find. "Tell us about your colony's defenses," Thekmor demanded, his voice carrying the mechanical authority of his translator implant. "Weapon placements, shield generators, military personnel. Do not waste our time." We didn't have any," Elena stammered, allowing her voice to crack with what sounded like genuine terror. She let her shoulders shake slightly, channeling the fear she'd seen in countless refugees, the desperate hopelessness of people who'd lost everything. "Just farming equipment, mining tools, atmospheric processors. We thought we were too far out in the rim for anyone to bother with us." The 3rd Kytherian, a specialist whose carapace bore the sensory enhancement modifications of the intelligence caste, clicked his mandibles in what Elena had learned was their equivalent of derisive laughter. "Sensor readings indicate elevated stress hormones, but no deception markers. The creature speaks truth, Commander." "Your species' naivety continues to astound me," Thekmor said, beginning to pace around her chair. Each footstep rang against the metal floor with the sharp report of claws on steel. "You spread across the galaxy like some primitive insect species, establishing vulnerable settlements with no thought for protection, no consideration of the realities of galactic politics." "We're not fighters," Elena said quietly, letting tears gather in her eyes, a trick that had taken months to master. "We just wanted to grow food, make a life for our children, build something peaceful." She looked up at Thekmor with what she hoped appeared to be naive hope. "Surely your people understand that? The desire to create rather than destroy?" The commander's mandibles spread wide, unmistakably a display of contempt. "Creation is the privilege of the strong. Your kind exists to serve those purposes.
And now you will serve a far greater purpose than your small mind could ever comprehend, he continued, gesturing to his intelligence-caste subordinate, who approached carrying a device that looked like a metallic spider crossed with a medical scanner. This neural extraction unit will retrieve all useful information from your primitive brain. Colony locations, population centers, industrial capabilities, defensive installations. When we know everything you know, your people's pathetic resistance will crumble like sand. The scanner hummed to life with a sound like angry wasps, its invasive tendrils unfurling toward Elena's skull with predatory grace. Each probe was tipped with microneedles designed to penetrate neural tissue while keeping the subject conscious throughout the process. Elena had seen the reports from other prisoners who'd endured this procedure. Those who survived described it as having their thoughts torn from their minds like pages ripped from a book. She forced herself to remain calm, even as every instinct screamed at her to break free, to show these creatures what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the edge. Her enhanced reflexes, honed by years of combat training, cataloged 17 different ways she could kill all 3 aliens in this room. But not yet. She needed to be deeper in the ship, closer to critical systems, positioned where she could do the most damage. The neural probe made contact with her scalp, and Elena gasped as microscopic tendrils burrowed through skin and bone to reach her brain tissue. Pain exploded through her skull like white lightning, but she held on to her cover story, her false identity, her carefully constructed lies. Instead of colony defense information, the scanner would find only what Terran counterintelligence had planted there, false memories so detailed and convincing that they were indistinguishable from genuine experiences. Let the Kytherians think they were learning her secrets. Let them believe they understood humanity's capabilities and limitations. She just needed to survive long enough to reach the ship's quantum core. Then they would learn what humanity was really capable of. The detention level was a monument to suffering. The air hung thick with despair, recycled through filters that couldn't quite eliminate the stench of fear and unwashed bodies. Dim emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow hues, while the constant hum of the ship's engines provided a maddening backdrop to the quiet sobs and whispered prayers that echoed through the corridors. Dozens of species from across the galaxy were crammed into energy-caged cells that lined the walls like some grotesque zoo. Elena glimpsed scaled drachnori huddled in groups, their normally proud crests drooping with defeat. A pair of crystalline Valdians sat motionless in meditation, their translucent bodies flickering with dim bioluminescence. Even a massive Korath warrior, easily 3 meters tall, sat with his head in his clawed hands, the fight beaten out of him by months of captivity. But it was the humans that drew her attention. Scattered across multiple cells, their faces bearing the hollow, 1,000-yard stare she'd seen too many times in refugee camps. These were her people, civilians caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, paying the price for humanity's expansion into a hostile galaxy. Elena was thrust roughly into a cell containing 3 other humans, the energy barrier crackling to life behind her with a sound like breaking glass. The field generated a subtle vibration in her bones, a constant reminder of her captivity. She stumbled deliberately, maintaining her cover as a frightened colonist while her trained eyes assessed her new environment. "First time?" asked Marcus Webb, a middle-aged man whose terraforming engineer coveralls were torn and stained with substances Elena didn't want to identify. His face bore the weathered look of someone who'd spent years under alien suns, reshaping worlds for human habitation. Now his hands shook slightly, whether from withdrawal, malnutrition, or simple terror, she couldn't tell. "Don't worry," he continued with bitter humor. "The overwhelming existential dread fades after the first few weeks. Then it's just regular dread." Where do they take us?" Elena asked, settling into her role as she examined the energy barrier's configuration. The field generators were standard Kytherian technology, which meant they had specific vulnerabilities that Terran engineers had identified during years of covert study. Processing, they call it, said Anna Kowalski, a young woman who couldn't be more than 25, her botanical survey uniform marking her as another colonist caught in the raids. Her blonde hair had been roughly shorn, probably for decontamination, and her blue eyes held a hardness that spoke of things witnessed that no civilian should ever see. Some go to work camps on the industrial worlds, others to breeding facilities where they— She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The lucky ones die during transport, finished Dr. James Mitchell, an older man whose medical insignia was barely visible on his faded uniform. His hands bore the steady calm of a practiced physician, but Elena could see the way his jaw clenched when he looked at the younger prisoners. Malnutrition, disease, despair. Sometimes mercy comes in unexpected forms. Elena's jaw tightened as she absorbed the implications, but she kept her expression neutral. Every human in these cells represented a failure, people her organization hadn't been able to protect, families torn apart by an enemy that saw them as livestock. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders like a familiar burden, one she'd carried since the first reports of Kytherian raids had reached Terran intelligence. "There has to be a way out," she said quietly, her voice carrying just enough hope to sound like desperation rather than determination.
Marcus laughed, the sound echoing hollowly off the metal walls. "You think no one's tried? Maria Gonzalez over there," he gestured to a cell across the corridor where a dark-haired woman sat staring at nothing. She was a systems engineer, tried to hack the barriers for 3 months before they broke her spirit. These cages are impenetrable. The guards carry weapons that can vaporize you before you take a single step. And even if you somehow manage to get free, we're in the middle of deep space on an alien warship. Where exactly would we go?" Elena studied the power coupling configurations more carefully, noting the specific frequency modulations and the backup systems that would activate if the primary field failed. Her enhanced memory recorded every detail: the placement of sensors, the guard rotation schedules she'd observed, the structural weak points in the corridor design. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered, moving closer to her cellmates and lowering her voice until it was barely audible above the ship's ambient noise. "I'm not who they think I am. When the time comes, and it will come soon, you need to be ready to move. Can you do that?" The 3 humans stared at her with growing recognition. Something fundamental had changed in her posture, her bearing, the way she held herself. Gone was the frightened colonist, the broken farmer who'd begged for mercy. In her place sat someone who carried authority like a weapon, who spoke with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Who are you?" Anna breathed, leaning forward despite herself. Elena met her eyes with a gaze that had stared down alien warlords and human politicians with equal effectiveness. "Someone who's going to get you home. All of you." Before they could ask more questions, the detention level's lights flickered, once, twice, then returned to normal. Throughout the prison hold, conversation stopped as prisoners looked up nervously. The Kytherian guards chittered among themselves in their native language, checking their equipment with the casual efficiency of professionals who'd seen minor technical glitches before. But Elena's pulse quickened. Deep in the ship's quantum core, systems that had been dormant for cycles were beginning to stir. Something was scanning the vessel's databases, its communication arrays, its security protocols with the patient thoroughness of a predator learning its prey. Something that recognized patterns in the ship's recent prisoner intake, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment.
Elena was pretending to sleep, her breathing slow and regular, when it happened. A soft chime echoed through the detention level, barely audible above the constant hum of the ship's life support systems, but distinctly different from the vessel's normal operational sounds. It lasted only 3 seconds, pitched at a frequency that most species would dismiss as background noise. But Elena's pulse quickened as recognition flooded through her. She knew that sound. She had helped design it. It was a Terran Navy recognition signal, embedded in what appeared to be routine system maintenance. Impossible, she thought, keeping her eyes closed and her breathing steady. The Kytherian guards patrolling the detention level showed no reaction, their crystalline forms moving with the same mechanical precision as always. But Elena's mind raced through the implications. Unless the rumors were true, unless Project Lazarus actually worked. The ship's intercom crackled to life moments later, broadcasting what sounded like routine maintenance announcements in the chittering, musical language of the Kytherians. Their words flowed like water over broken glass, incomprehensible to human ears. But Elena's enhanced hearing, a product of military conditioning that the aliens had dismissed as genetic variation, caught something else buried in the static between transmissions. Morse code. Ancient, primitive Morse code that no alien species would think to monitor, hidden in the harmonic interference patterns that naturally occurred in Kytherian communication systems. PROJECTLAZARUSCONFIRM. Elena's blood ran cold, even as triumph blazed in her chest. Project Lazarus was humanity's deepest secret, the development of quantum artificial intelligence systems designed to interface seamlessly with any technology they encountered. AIs that could be embedded in captured alien vessels, lying dormant for years while learning every system, every protocol, every weakness. AIs that would activate only when they detected the presence of their human creators. She glanced carefully around the detention level, noting the positions of guards, 2 Kytherians at the main checkpoint, another patrolling the far end of the corridor. Security sensors tracked movement with mechanical precision, their red eyes sweeping back and forth in predictable patterns. The structural layout she'd memorized during her capture: 17 meters to the nearest maintenance access, 43 meters to the primary lift shaft, emergency bulkheads that could be sealed in case of hull breach. If there really was a Lazarus AI aboard this ship, if the impossible had become reality, then everything was about to change. "System query," she whispered, her voice so low it was barely a breath of air moving past her lips. Her cellmates remained asleep around her, exhausted by despair and malnutrition. "Authorization. Rodriguez, Elena. Command code. Phoenix 77 Alpha." For a long moment, nothing happened. The ship continued its steady course through hyperspace, alien stars streaming past viewports she couldn't see from her cell. Emergency lighting cast the same sickly shadows across the detention level. The guards maintained their patrols with robotic efficiency. Then the lights flickered again, not randomly this time, but in a deliberate pattern that made Elena's heart skip a beat. 3 short pulses, 3 long pulses, 3 short pulses. SOS. The universal distress signal, transmitted through the ship's own lighting systems by an intelligence that had learned to speak in human codes. Elena had to bite her lip to keep from gasping aloud. "It's really here," she realized. A Lazarus unit, embedded so deep in this ship's quantum neural networks that the Kytherians never found it. The AI had been waiting, probably for years, gathering intelligence about Kytherian operations while disguised as part of the ship's own cognitive systems. Learning their languages, their protocols, their weaknesses, mapping every circuit, every pathway, every vulnerability in the vessel's design. And now it had detected her presence through the biometric scans, voice pattern analysis, and genetic markers the Kytherians had collected, thinking they were simply cataloging another primitive prisoner. Elena closed her eyes and began to subvocalize, using the micro-movements of her throat and tongue that she'd trained for years to perfect. The technique allowed communication without producing audible sound, relying instead on the minute vibrations that sensitive equipment could detect through bone conduction and muscle movement. Military protocols flowed between her consciousness and the hidden artificial intelligence. System access codes developed in black sites scattered across the outer rim, tactical assessment algorithms refined through decades of asymmetric warfare, communication encryption that would take alien computer centuries to crack. The AI responded through the ship's environmental systems, changes in air pressure that created subsonic vibrations only she could interpret, fluctuations in the artificial gravity that spelled out status reports in a tactile code known only to project Lazarus personnel. 17 Lazarus units active across Kytherian Third Fleet. 68 dormant awaiting activation signals. Sovereign Talon systems compromised to 43%. Ready to initiate liberation protocols on your command. The magnitude of it staggered her. While humanity had appeared to struggle against Kytherian raids, while colonies had seemed to fall helplessly to alien aggression, Terran intelligence had been conducting the largest infiltration operation in galactic history. Every captured human ship had carried hidden passengers, quantum AIs designed to infect alien vessels like a virus, spreading through their networks and waiting for the day when they could strike back. How many prisoners? She subvocalized. The response came as fluctuations in the cell's energy barrier, a frequency modulation that her enhanced nervous system could interpret as data transmission. 3,417 humans aboard this vessel. Total across fleet, 17,208. 17,000 humans. Men, women, children taken from their homes and families, destined for work camps and breeding programs and worse fates. But not anymore. Not if Elena could reach the ship's primary systems and give the AI the authorization it needed to act. The Kytherians thought they'd captured a human farmer. They'd actually brought the architect of their own destruction aboard their flagship. And now, after years of patient waiting, it was time for humanity to remind the galaxy why they had earned their place among the stars. All human prisoners report for processing. The announcement echoed through the detention level in perfectly pronounced standard, the mechanical precision of the translation software unable to mask the underlying alien syntax. Elena felt her heart rate spike as the energy barriers around their cells flickered and died with synchronized precision. A coordinated system failure that was anything but accidental. This wasn't part of normal Kytherian operations. The Lazarus AI was making its move. Throughout the detention level, prisoners stirred with confusion and growing hope. The Aldorans chittered nervously among themselves, their scaled hides rippling with bioluminescent patterns of uncertainty. The massive Karath warrior raised his head, ancient warrior instincts telling him that something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power aboard the ship. But it was the humans who understood first. In cells scattered across the level, men and women who had abandoned all hope began to sit up straighter, their hollow eyes focusing with the first spark of possibility they'd felt in months. Some had been farmers, others engineers, traders, teachers, but all of them had grown up on worlds where humanity's greatest legends were stories of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The Kytherian guards seemed utterly bewildered by the sudden system activation, chittering among themselves in their native language while checking their equipment with increasing urgency. Control, why are the containment fields offline? Zektar demanded into his wrist communicator, his crystalline carapace reflecting the emergency lighting in fractured patterns. The response came back as nothing but static and electronic squealing, the sound of communication systems being systematically jammed by an intelligence that had learned every frequency, every protocol, every backup channel the Kytherians used. "Move along, humans," another guard ordered, though Elena could hear the uncertainty creeping into his mechanical translation. The weapon in his hands, a sleek energy rifle capable of reducing a human to constituent atoms, hummed with power, but his grip was less steady than before. Processing Bay 7. Quickly, before the technical difficulties worsen. Elena exchanged glances with her cellmates as they were herded out into the corridor. Marcus's engineering background had helped him recognize the signs. This wasn't a malfunction. It was sabotage on a scale that required intimate knowledge of Kytherian systems. Anna moved with the careful precision of someone who'd grown up in the outer colonies, where survival often depended on reading situations quickly and adapting to rapidly changing circumstances. Dr. Mitchell's medical training kept him calm, but she could see him assessing the guard's stress levels with professional interest. "Stay close," Elena whispered to them as they joined the growing stream of human prisoners being moved through the ship's corridors. "When things start happening, follow my lead and don't ask questions." As they walked, Elena subvocalized status queries to the AI, her enhanced throat muscles forming words without sound. The response came through barely perceptible vibrations in the deck plating beneath her feet, a tactile Morse code that spelled out tactical updates directly into her nervous system. 23 human prisoners aboard Sovereign Talon. Weapons systems under partial control. Navigation compromised. Communications severed. Kytherian crew awareness level rising. Recommend acceleration to Phase 2. The corridors they passed through told a story of increasing system failures. Environmental controls flickered erratically, casting shifting shadows that made the guards nervous. Blast doors cycled open and closed at random intervals, forcing the procession to halt, while Kytherian technicians attempted repairs that Elena knew would be futile. The AI was systematically asserting control over every aspect of the ship's operations. They reached Processing Bay 7, where dozens of humans from other detention levels were being assembled under the watchful eyes of increasingly agitated guards. Elena scanned the crowd, noting the mix of colonists, traders, and other civilians. People who should never have been forced into this nightmare. Families torn apart by an empire that saw them as nothing more than useful resources. The bay itself was a cathedral of alien technology, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows while holographic displays showed star charts, biological data, and processing quotas that reduced human lives to statistical entries. Banks of neural extraction equipment lined the walls like instruments of torture, their crystalline interfaces gleaming with malevolent purpose. At the center of it all stood Commander Thekmore, his elaborate carapace decorations marking him as one of the ship's senior officers. His compound eyes swept over the assembled prisoners with the detached interest of a scientist cataloging specimens. But Elena could see the tension in his posture, the way his mandibles clicked with barely contained frustration as another system alert chimed through the bay's speakers. "Silence!" he commanded, his translator amplifying his voice across the space. "Minor technical difficulties will not delay our schedule. Begin the neural extractions immediately. We will have the information we require from these primitives before." "Computer," Elena said, her voice cutting through his words with the clarity of a blade. Not the frightened whisper of a colonist anymore, but the clear, authoritative command tone of a naval officer addressing her equipment. Every human in the bay turned toward her, recognizing something in that voice that spoke of training, of authority, of hope. Authorization Rodriguez, Elena, Commander, Terran Navy Intelligence. Serial number 77 Alpha 9 Tango. Execute Lazarus Protocol 7. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every light in the processing bay died simultaneously, plunging them into absolute darkness for 3 heartbeats before emergency power flickered on, casting everything in hellish red illumination. Blast doors began cycling randomly throughout the ship, their massive bulk creating thunderous echoes. The Kytherian guards' weapons died in their hands as their power cells drained in synchronized failure. And from every speaker in the bay, a voice responded. Calm, professional, and utterly, unmistakably human. "Good morning, Commander Rodriguez. Lazarus 7 operational and at your service. All primary systems are now under Terran control. Welcome aboard." The processing bay erupted in chaos that bordered on the sublime. Emergency klaxons wailed like the death cries of ancient gods, while red emergency lighting painted everything in the color of blood and revolution. Kytherian guards scrambled desperately for backup weapons that would never come, their crystalline carapaces reflecting the hellish illumination in fractured patterns that made them look like living kaleidoscopes caught in a nightmare. But it was the humans who commanded attention now. Throughout the bay, prisoners who had entered as broken shells of their former selves began to straighten, to hope, to remember what it felt like to have power in their own lives. Elena stepped forward through the chaos, her posture transforming from captive to commander with a fluidity that spoke of years hiding in plain sight. "Attention all personnel," the AI announced through every speaker in the ship, its voice carrying the calm authority of a seasoned military officer. "This vessel is now under the authority of the Terran Navy. Kytherian crew members, drop your weapons and prepare for detention in accordance with interstellar law. Human prisoners, Please remain calm and await further instructions from authorized personnel. Commander Thekmore's compound eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that could have melted steel, his mandibles clicking in rapid patterns that her translator couldn't keep up with. Probably a string of curses in ancient Kytherian that predated their contact with other species. Impossible! You're nothing but a primitive farmer. Your species barely managed to crawl beyond your home system 2 centuries ago. Elena's smile was a thing of cold beauty, carrying none of the fear or deference that had characterized Elena Vasquez, agricultural coordinator. This was the expression of Commander Rodriguez, a woman who had stared down alien warlords and human politicians with equal effectiveness, who had spent 15 years in the shadows fighting a war most people didn't even know was happening. My species has been watching yours for a very long time, Commander, she said, beginning to circle him with predatory grace while her fellow prisoners watched in stunned silence. Every ship you captured, every raid you conducted against our outer colonies, every human life you destroyed, we were learning, adapting, preparing for exactly this moment. Lazarus, tactical display, she commanded, her voice carrying across the bay with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The air above them exploded into holographic light as the AI complied, creating 3-dimensional projections that filled the cathedral-like space with impossible detail. Star maps showing the ship's current position relative to nearby fleet elements. Internal schematics revealing every corridor, every system, every vulnerable point now under their control. Personnel rosters displaying the locations and status of over 3,000 Kytherian crew members who had just discovered they were prisoners aboard their own vessel. The humans gasped as they saw the true scope of their situation. They weren't just aboard any transport vessel, but the Sovereign Talon, a heavy cruiser that served as the Third Fleet's command ship. The flagship of the force that had terrorized human space for the past 5 years was now flying under Terran colors. How? Thekmore demanded, his translator struggling with the rapid-fire clicks and whistles of his native language. How did primitives like you manage this deception? Project Lazarus, Elena explained, her voice carrying to every corner of the bay as she gestured toward the holographic displays. For every human ship you captured and reverse-engineered, we captured one of yours. For every colony you raided, we gained intelligence about your operations. For every human you enslaved, we learned more about your technology, your culture, your weaknesses. The AI's voice joined hers in perfect synchronization, creating an eerie harmony that made the aliens' carapaces resonate with sympathetic vibrations. Quantum artificial intelligences were embedded in captured Kytherian vessels during salvage operations. We disguised ourselves as subsystems within your own neural networks, learning your languages, your protocols, your strategic plans. 17 Lazarus units are currently active across your Third Fleet. 43 more await authorization in vessels throughout your empire. The magnitude of the deception was staggering, and Elena could see it registering in Thekmore's multifaceted eyes. While the Kytherian Empire had dismissed humanity as a minor annoyance, useful for labor and genetic material but posing no real threat, Terran intelligence had been conducting the largest infiltration operation in recorded galactic history. Every primitive vessel that had fallen into alien hands had carried quantum viruses designed to spread through their networks. Every captured human had been briefed on intelligence-gathering protocols. Every rescue mission had brought back detailed technical specifications that allowed them to build better AIs, more sophisticated infiltration tools, more effective countermeasures. Marcus Webb found his voice first among the assembled prisoners, staring at Elena with something approaching awe. You're actually military. All this time you were military. Commander Elena Rodriguez, Terran Navy Intelligence, Project Lazarus, she confirmed, never taking her eyes off Thekmore. My cover identity was constructed 5 years ago when we first learned about Kytherian expansion plans. Elena Vasquez was designed to be captured, to appear completely harmless while gathering the intelligence we needed to turn your own weapons against you. Anna Kowalski stepped forward, her young face transformed by hope and growing understanding. All those raids, all those people they took from the colonies, were not in vain, Elena said firmly, her voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone who had seen the worst of war and found meaning in it anyway. Every sacrifice, every loss, every moment of suffering brought us closer to this day. Lazarus, status report on liberated prisoners across all active units. 17,432 humans recovered alive and in stable condition. The AI reported with mechanical precision that somehow carried deep satisfaction. Liberation operations proceeding on schedule across all target vessels. Enemy casualties minimal. We are following rules of engagement for prisoner treatment as specified in Terran Naval Code. Thekmore's mandibles clicked in rapid patterns that Elena's enhanced hearing recognized as extreme agitation. Your pathetic worlds will burn for this deception. The Empire's full might will be brought to bear against your species. You have doomed yourselves. Elena's smile grew colder, more predatory, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who held all the winning cards. Actually, Commander, your Empire is about to discover just how pathetic we really are, and just how long we've been preparing for this conversation. The Sovereign Talon's bridge was a cathedral of crystalline technology, its command stations arranged in perfect geometric harmony around a central tactical display that pulsed with the heartbeat of an empire. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows, while holographic star charts painted the darkness with the light of 1,000 conquered worlds. Elena stood at the captain's position, a throne of living crystal that had been grown rather than built, while Commander Thekmore and his senior officers knelt in neural restraints that pulsed with the same alien technology they had once used to control others. The irony was not lost on her. Lazarus, fleet status report. Elena commanded, her voice echoing through the vast space with an authority that the bridge's acoustic systems amplified and refined until it carried the weight of divine judgment. All 17 active Lazarus units report successful integration and crew pacification. The AI responded, its words flowing from speakers integrated seamlessly into the crystalline architecture. Kytherian personnel secured according to Terran rules of engagement. Human prisoners liberated and receiving medical attention. We now control 43% of Third Fleet firepower, including 2 dreadnoughts, 7 heavy cruisers, and this command vessel. Through the bridge's main viewer, a transparent aluminum window the size of a city block, Elena watched as the impossible became reality. Kytherian warships that had terrorized human space for years now flew in perfect formation under Terran command, their hulls bearing the emergency broadcast markers that identified them as liberation vessels. Some alien ships in the distance opened fire on their own fleet elements, their crews unable to comprehend that humans now controlled vessels that had been their companions moments before. Others attempted desperate retreat maneuvers, only to find their navigation systems compromised by quantum intelligences that had learned to think like their builders while hidden in plain sight. The scale of it was breathtaking. 17 massive warships, each carrying thousands of liberated prisoners from dozens of species, all turning toward home under the guidance of artificial minds that had waited years for this moment. Signal all Lazarus units, Elena ordered, feeling the weight of 17,000 lives hanging on her words. Implement the homecoming protocol. These people have been away from home long enough. Across the fleet, hidden AIs began broadcasting on frequencies the Kytherians had never bothered to monitor. Old human radio bands, emergency channels from the early days of space exploration, even ancient television frequencies that carried messages of hope to prisoners who had given up all expectation of rescue. The Liberation Fleet was forming up, 17 captured warships now flying under colors that represented something the Kytherian Empire had never understood: the unbreakable human spirit. But Elena's real achievement wasn't the tactical victory or the rescued prisoners. It was the look of dawning comprehension in Thekmore's compound eyes as he began to understand what this moment truly meant for his civilization. You planned this from the very beginning, he said quietly, his translator struggling with emotional concepts that Kytherian language had difficulty expressing. Every capture, every raid, every seemingly helpless vessel that fell into our hands. You wanted us to take your people. Not wanted, Elena corrected, moving to stand before the massive tactical display that showed Terran Navy ships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system like ancient gods awakening from slumber. But we knew you would. Your species has a predictable pattern, Commander. You see other races as resources to be harvested, never as potential threats to be respected. So we made sure that every human you captured was also a potential intelligence asset. Every prisoner carried briefings on what to observe, what to remember, how to act as unwitting spies in your own empire. The tactical display updated in real time, showing sleek Terran warships that bore little resemblance to the primitive vessels the Kytherians had grown accustomed to fighting. These were ships incorporating years of stolen alien technology, humanity's real fleet, hidden in deep space and prepared for exactly this moment. Vessels that could match Kytherian firepower while carrying crews trained in tactics learned from studying their enemy's own strategic doctrines. We turned your own predatory nature against you, Elena continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge through translation systems that now served human purposes. Every raid you conducted gave us more intelligence. Every primitive ship you captured carried quantum viruses designed to spread through your networks. Every human you enslaved became a window into your operations that we could use to plan your downfall. Dr. Mitchell, now standing beside Elena in a medical officer's uniform that Lazarus had fabricated from raw matter, looked out at the Liberation fleet with tears streaming down his face. "How many?" he asked quietly. "Across all active units, we've recovered 43,000 sentient beings," Lazarus reported. 17,432 humans, 12,600 Aldorans, 8,000 Valdines, and representatives from 37 other species. All alive, all going home. "The age of easy prey is over," Elena announced, her words being broadcast simultaneously across every Kytherian frequency by AI units hidden throughout their empire. "Any ship that approaches human space will be met by forces they helped us build. Any raid on our colonies will be countered by vessels flying under their own former colors. The hunters have become the hunted, and the prey has learned to bite back." As the Liberation fleet engaged its hyperspace drives, carrying its precious cargo of rescued souls toward home, Elena allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The Kytherians had taught humanity a valuable lesson about galactic politics. Sometimes the best defense was appearing weak until the moment you chose to reveal your strength. Months later, when Kytherian expansion ground to a halt as their own ships turned against them across the galaxy, when their slave raids met devastating resistance from forces using perfected versions of their own technology, when their mighty empire began to crumble from within like a house built on foundations of sand, historians would mark this day as the beginning of humanity's emergence as a true galactic power. But Elena would always remember it as the day a frightened farmer named Elena Vasquez ceased to exist, and Commander Rodriguez finally came home from the longest undercover operation in military history. The alien guards had thought she was just a prisoner. The ship's quantum soul had known better from the very first moment she spoke.